another video, and today I wanted to talk about why NE is about potential. You hear and see in socionics a lot that NE, there's like these one-word associations that people use to talk about the information elements, I'm just gonna say elements, such a long word to say. The elements, or MBTI's cognitive functions, and that word basically serves to kind of highlight the most essential feature of that element and what information that element is trying to either judge or perceive, basically. And so a little critical thinking can kind of get you to a valid and fair understanding of what the information element is about. And this is true with all information elements. Another example, SE being called force, and or SI being called homeostasis, or senses, whatever you want to call it. TE being pragmatism, TI being consistency, internal consistency, FE emotions, FI relations, so on and so forth. So first off, when you're talking about intuition is in an abstract domain. Intuition is not something that you can see physically. When someone has an intuition of something happening in front of them, you're not seeing the intuition. You can hear them talk about their intuition using a structure, which would be language, in order to understand what they're seeing in their own minds. But you can't see what's in their mind. Like you can see physical reactions they may be having to the weather. That's something physical that they're experiencing that you could also see, because that information of the weather is being metabolized in a person physically, and it has effects that demonstrate that process, namely sneezing, or them breaking out, some rash kind of forming on their skin, so on and so forth. That's kind of their body reacting to sense data in their environment that would elicit feelings of discomfort in the person, so on and so forth. That you can physically see, that is my point. And so to contrast something like that pertains to explicit sensory data that you can hear, feel, touch, taste, and see, intuition is not something that is physically present. And so extroverted intuition is something abstract. We obviously know that from the IME dichotomies that it's extroverted, it's irrational, it is static, it is, so just going from those, and it's abstract. So it's an abstract, static, irrational, extroverted information element. So it being extroverted means that, now this kind of gets into the semantics of what system that you use to interpret the phenomena, obviously, but I'm using kind of a socionics definition because I think it makes sense. You could use another one, but it's not trying to refine what it's perceiving. It's not trying to reduce that information in order to enhance the quality of that information. That's what an introverted element is seeking to do. There's a quantity quality distinction when it comes to the extroverted and introverted elements. And so all the introverted elements are trying to take information and draw something more refined from it. And there's more of a process with it. And there's more time given to understanding that information in some fashion. And there's more nuance and complexity as well. So extrovert intuition is extroverted, so it's more concerned about the quantity of its perceptions. And it necessarily focuses on more of that kind of information. And so there's an anticipation and a seeking nature that kind of comes along with extrovert intuition. And it asks a question of what's next, what's new, what's interesting, what's captivating. And so they're always on the cutting edge of what's intriguing, or some potentially intriguing, something that can pull them from a state of tranquility and rest in the physical present environment, and can draw them into new horizons, which as a byproduct kind of leaves old ideas in the past. It necessarily leaves old ways of thinking in the past, or a kind of attitude towards the past that is ignoring the past, right? That's why the function of the ignoring function, that's why it's called that, because it is truly, basically in all facets of the word, ignoring that kind of information. It's ignoring the refinement of ideas or potential. Like it's if there's nothing more to extract potentially from maybe a previous interest, then the interest is dead. There's nothing left of it. It has no more life in it, and so there's no reason to constantly go back to this thing unless there is something truly to continue exploring within that thing. And so sometimes if there's an any type that has a particular interest that they haven't given up, if you're using a kind of behavioral approach to typing, you might use that as an argument against them being any lead, because people conflate the need for ideational novelty in exploration with them being hyperfixated on a particular interest. And they're saying, well, they can't be an any lead because any leads at all times are trying to explore what's novel and possible and interesting. Yes, generally that's true. However, if they do select and find something that has maximum potential, then they're going to stick with that thing. So it says something more about the object of their attention rather than them and whether or not they're in any lead. What they're focusing on and tinkering with must be truly captivating for them, such that they're not just giving it up. They're not just looking for something new as a result. And so it's extroverted. So it's expanding the range of what is possible and expanding the range of potential. And the idea of finding that particularly interesting thing is more enticing to them than actually experiencing the thing that they're interested in to a certain degree. Because if not, then you have the potential moving to what's actual. And if they're about potential, then the thing that they're chasing has to have constant novelty within it. It can't be extremely definite. It can't have these fortified walls around it such that there's no need to think about the potential of the thing, because the thing is so confined and so defined that there's little to explore within it. I could think of an analogy where you have this captivating old house in your town that everyone talks about, and the mystery of it is partially because no one has been there, and there isn't anything anything that's uber explicit about the house. The intrigue usually has to do with a level of vagueness to a certain extent. And vagueness allows the mind to imagine and to create potential events within the story. And so it's different if someone, like I could see in any lead, if there's something posted online about every aspect of the house, the homeowners and all this kind of stuff, the whole history, the any person would be kind of like, well, now I don't care about it. Like, I want to experience this on my own and kind of draw out the essence of the house and the potential of the house and all these kind of things on my own. If you have clear, explicit information about the house, to a certain degree, it becomes like it lacks the luster that it had before. And obviously this depends on the creative function of the any lead, because if they're TI, then structure is not an aversion. There's actual utility in it, and understanding universal laws allows them to apply potential across the spectrum of universal laws. If this physical law is true in all circumstances, then imagine what life would be like on Mars, for example, or what life would be like across the galaxy, and what kind of life can be produced from these laws that are universal. And if they're universal, they're consistent, and it's quite probable or possible that other universes can contain life, so on and so forth. So my point in saying all this is that there is history on the one end, which is introverted intuition. And then extroverted intuition is primarily focused on the future because the past has happened. The only time I could see an NE user being interested in history from the standpoint of what's possible in the future, given this broad history of civilization that we have and all the technological advances throughout the ages and all that kind of stuff, and having a general understanding of that in order to project possibilities ahead of them. But so the quantity of ideas and potential is what intrigues NE leads. It being static is more focusing on the features of an idea, whether the idea is, if there is actual potential within it or not, if it's exciting. And the static term, I think, highlights real possibilities that could happen in any given situation. This could happen, right? That's a static statement. This could happen, this could happen, this could happen. A dynamic statement is talking about how two occurrences relate with one another. Well, if this thing happens, it's because of X, Y, and Z of this first occurrence. And this first occurrence generated this second occurrence, and this is the way that the second occurrence began, basically. And so NE is diverging from the present moment and seeing static possibilities that ignore the relationships between events within time. I could go to the store today is different from saying how I could get to the store today or how I could go to the store today. I could get in my car, I could drive to Kroger or the nearest grocery store, so on and so forth. I could go, or I could do that in order to get this, or I need food, and so me needing food and wanting to make this meal tonight would be the justification for me going to the store. Whereas NE is simply talking about the latent possibilities of what could happen at any given moment. I could go to the store, I could go to the mall, I could walk the dog, I could work out, I could do all of those things. NI is saying, how could I do all those things within the limited time that I have? And how do each one of those possibilities relate with one another in regards to time? Well, if I work out now, I should probably eat this food, some type of carbs to give me energy, and I'm going to have to drive 20 minutes to the gym, and after I'm going to make a protein shake, and then I could walk my dog, and it's trying to draw a thread of sequences within time that organize possibilities. That's what NI is doing. Drawing a thread within time and organizing possibilities. And if they will, and NI leads are ignoring possibilities if the possibilities within time have no way to they have no way to thread something through it. If they're so far out from the thread of time sequentially, they're not really interested, they're not really warranted to give attention to. So NI leads keep NE very close to the sequence of time, the logical progression within time. It's very close to them, whereas NE leads are obviously doing the opposite. NE leads, you can say, so I should say that NE is in the backdrop of an NI lead necessarily. It's in the same domain, so that NE is present, and I kind of see a line going like this. Some blobs of NE or possibilities may be closer to the thread, the sequence of time. Others may be further away, and the same is true with an NE lead. There's necessarily a line that goes throughout history, a progression of events within time. And from that, NE is basically is aware of time, but in some fashion ignores the past and only is focusing on where things are going just in the background of what they're already paying attention to. They're already paying attention to time and chance, with an emphasis on chance. So what else was I going to say? That's the static part of NE. And I obviously explained the dynamic part of NI and trying to demonstrate the contrast between the two. A dynamic relationship to intuition has a focus on cause and effect relationships within time. And as a result, often have a outcome-minded way of understanding intuition of time. the outcome to an any lead is irrelevant. The outcomes of certain things are inevitable, and they're aware of that fact. And because they're aware of the fact, it doesn't seem interesting to talk about in discussion, only when it's absolutely necessary to bring that up. They're already kind of aware of that, which is why they're generating what's possible. If I know that there's a inevitable end to something as an any lead, then I'm going to try to, in the moment, SI, presently right here before me, try to redirect the inevitable by thinking of what I could be doing otherwise. Like, if this train is tracking down the train tracks and I know that it's going to crash, I'm like, okay, well, what? I should probably find a way to not die. Like, this would be a good time to jump, right? And that's kind of the way that any leads think. And some behavioral manifestations and repercussions of that is that to other people, they may seem to lack the ability to endure through difficult situations or inevitable situations, because that's the way that their mind is programmed. They're trying to avoid the inevitable by thinking of what could be available to them, right? And so there's an opportunistic aspect of any also that they share with SE, both being irrational types. And I think opportunism is a term that's probably true for both of them. And so they're trying to jump ship before it crashes. Why wait? Whereas an NI lead might see some kind of beauty in it, weirdly enough. There's something thematic and deep about this. The inevitable for an NI lead, I'm thinking more of an II, just how my brain thinks, but there's something, and of course, ILI wouldn't relate to this necessarily, and that's why the creative function is significant. I'm just using this as an example, but that there's actually something of meaning in the inevitable doom that comes ahead. You're like, why? What do you mean? Right? And so to me, that's foreign. I'm like, that's the most retarded way of thinking. I don't get that at all. But nevertheless, who wants to practically, if you're on a boat and someone says that, you're like, would you shut up? Can we throw you over the ship? You're not I don't need to hear that. I don't want to hear it. Like, yes, we can see. Let's just have it done and then we're done. We don't need let's just wait for you're like, shut up. Yeah. Whereas Innie's like, nah, bro, like, I can see the shore from here. I'm going to take my chances. Assessing probability. Is there a shark in the water? How likely am I going to get eaten? How likely am I going to gas out before I get there? Is it even worth it? Right? They're thinking of all of those things. If there is a possibility that I could come out alive, then I'm going to take that possibility instead of staring the inevitable in the face until the end. Right? A little gloomy, but you kind of get what I'm putting down. So the behavior of an NE lead can oftentimes seem to others as escapism or avoidance in some way. And these are behaviors that are truly just generated from the IME dichotomies. It's extroverted, right? There's a expansiveness about that. There's a kind of lack of refinement to that. It's static. This is that. This is thing A versus thing B. This is real potential. This is not potential. Static features of possibilities. It is not viscerally present. It's not physically interactable. You're not touching intuition. You're not smelling intuition. Intuition isn't a thing you can grab out in the environment you're in. It's a product of the mind, and it is relative to that person's mind, and they can experience and demonstrate their intuition only through vehicles of language, obviously, but they can see in their mind what they're seeing. We can't see their process, them processing time or processing potential. We can only see the effects of that, or we can understand that kind of thinking by way of them explaining that. So there's a quantity focus, there's a static focus, and there is a abstract focus or a conceptual focus. What is in front of me is not enough. What's in front of me is self-evident, and it is what it is, and it interacts with other things organically, naturally, and there isn't really anything to say about that. But what could be is something that has far more emotional excitation and intrigue to it, because it's not mundane. It's not necessarily observable to all people. And the mindset of an INI lead could be that, yes, there is a non-conforming aspect to INI lead. There is a kind of anti-traditionality, potentially, depending on the INI lead, whether it's an IE or an I lead, to a certain extent, that there is a way to view reality that is hyper-traditional, and is focusing on what has already been done and how that's been done in the past. And because of that, that doesn't necessarily breed much potential to a certain extent. Obviously, times have changed. I'm trying to think the way that any person would think about this, but and how that information works. Times do change, people change, and civilizations are always moving in different directions. And because of that, the traditionality of today may not be the same traditionality of the past, whether you're talking about traditionality in the family nucleus or in culture in general or at workplaces or ideologically or economically, whatever the case is. But my point saying that is that there is a kind of aversion to monotony and these kind of predictable cyclical patterns, whether it's in their own life that forms that comes about through habit formation and doing the same thing every day in the same order, so on and so forth. There's something about that an any lead has some lack of appreciation for. The irony is that kind of day-to-day functional flow of events is actually what they want and what they need, and that's kind of the dual-seeking function. And an MBTI kind of any SI relationship is that they have a clear antipathy for that information, that they hate SI. And that's not necessarily true. That isn't true, actually. They value SI, so why would they hate it? That's a contradictory statement. They don't hate SI. They suck at SI. They are trying to move towards it, and they appreciate other people for being strong at it. That doesn't sound like they have a lack of appreciation for it. It just means that they're not strong at integrating the information in their lives. So there's a kind of, and they might be using their NE in order to potentially get them into that rhythm. But that kind of peaceful environment has kind of a soothing effect psychologically on NE leads. And a lot of times they have some kind of, this is more IE, but affinity for household management in a way, or kind of the house being the safe haven. And they also connect any woo-woo weirdness with SI in ways. Weird practices that they could easily just like take a couple of days off of work and it would be like, you're fine. You don't need to go talk to a Buddhist monk or whatever, practice these weird esoteric practices in order to bring rest. You don't need to do that. You could literally drink some water, work out somewhat consistently, and get good sleep. That's all you need. You don't need to do the whole, I need to travel overseas to learn how to get 8 hours of sleep. You're like, no, you don't. You don't have to do that. Yeah, what else? And again, it's worth saying that I'm really trying to talk about what's most fundamental about any as an information element. And obviously, when you get into different kinds of types, when you get into like an ILE or ENTP versus an ENFP, there's obvious differences. And their NE takes on not necessarily a different form. It's still fundamentally NE, but the way it appears along with the creative kind of creates a different application, I guess you could say, of potential. One would be applied to relationships, and the other would be applied to abstract laws. And so if you're thinking about someone you know that's either an ENFP or ENTP, an ENFP seeks potential. All the behaviors I talked about is really applied in relationships a lot of the time, friendships, so on and so forth. And where they are kind of fickle or superficial, or they find someone more interesting than you and they just ditch you. That could be a possibility. Or if you apply it to the realm of intellectuality, that ILEs or ENTPs get kind of, unless there's a certain conceptual idea that's extremely interesting and that allows them to think about how it can be potentially applied and how it relates to different things. If it doesn't have that potential, then they would just ditch that idea and move on to something else. And that's what kind of results in them amassing large amounts of information, whether it's factual coming from extroverted logic, or it is just playing with different ideas from extroverted intuition. And there's just a trail of dead ideas in the past that they've explored, and they kind of have this disdain for them, or not even disdain, but it's kind of just like, this is no longer, I talked about that in the past. I was interested in that, and never mind now. And if someone brings something up of interest to them that's relevant to their previous hobbies or interests, maybe there is a potential there that they didn't see before, or, and it may be worth going back to it potentially. So one is applying all those behaviors to the realm of conceptual laws, and the other one's applying them to functional relationships. And so the NE kind of has a different vehicle of expression that way, and utility and all that kind of stuff. And the polar kind of affects how, in some way, the NE is being utilized, and just creates an interesting dynamic. For an ENFP being TI polar, they're always going to really, theoretically, they would have a better use of NE if it was being applied in the realm of logic, rather than using extroverted sensation being applied with introverted logic. SC and TI are in their superego, and they're both weak, but theoretical ideas and their conceptual structures, they would have a better time doing that, and kind of sharing with their cousins in that way with ENTPs. And likewise, an ENTP could talk about potential issues in a relationship if someone brought them up, even though they don't like talking about relationships, but it's being kind of done in the realm of what's possible, what could happen, all this kind of stuff. And they're still kind of interpreting it, obviously, from the lens of their ego and their ego block still. And the ENTP would still be trying to understand laws and all that kind of stuff. And likewise, an ENFP would still be trying to talk about the relevance of relationship if the conversation is about logic in some sense. But if it's in the realm that's mutual with both about extroverted intuition, then they might have some more seamless way of kind of navigating that to where it doesn't hit them as hard. But if you're talking to an ENTP and talking to them, asking them about people they hate or they love and why they love them, or people they're close with, now you're bringing in extroverted sensation with it, along with FI, which they're both weak at and they both don't like. And as a result, they're not going to be able to do it. So yeah, I think that's all I have. I could keep rambling, but there's probably no point. All right, peace.